I met Eliza in the spring of 2011. I was working the late shift at a logistics firm in Philadelphia, just out of college, grinding long hours, trying to prove I was worth something. She walked into my life in the most ordinary way, a friend of a friend at a dinner none of us wanted to be at. It was one of those cramped apartment nights, chairs borrowed from every room, takeout containers stacked across the table. She sat across from me, stirring a lemonade with a fork, and we talked about everything but work. There was something easy about her. She had that energy, the kind that could cut through awkward silences and pull people into orbit without even trying. She worked in early childhood education, teaching pre-K. She told me she loved the chaos of it, how the kids didn't filter anything. That night, after everyone left, we stayed behind and washed dishes just to keep talking. We went for coffee the next day. Then lunch. Then 3 months of steady weekends and long calls that never felt long enough. A year later, we moved in together. It was a little row house in Fishtown, cheap rent, exposed brick that looked cooler than it actually felt in the winter. We figured things out the way most young couples do, slowly, messily, with a lot of trial and error. I learned how to cook more than microwave meals, and she stopped buying expensive candles after one of them exploded in the kitchen. We laughed through most of it. When we fought, we figured out how to fight better the next time. We got married 2 years after moving in. Nothing fancy, a courthouse on a Tuesday, dinner with friends afterward, a weekend trip to the Poconos. She didn't want a big dress or 1,000 photos. She just wanted to be married. I liked that about her. Still do, in a way. Over time, life began to settle into something solid. I got promoted, moved out of night shifts and into project management. Eliza opened her own in-home daycare. It started with just 3 kids, neighbors and friends, but it grew fast. She was good at what she did. Parents trusted her. She had this gift for turning chaos into calm. We bought a house just outside the city, a quiet street, wide front yard, enough space for her daycare downstairs and a full living area upstairs for us. It wasn't flashy, but it was ours. Every corner of it had something of hers, plants, books, soft throws, a dozen coffee mugs that somehow kept multiplying. I set up an office in the den, spent more time at home once I started managing remote teams. We made space for each other's routines without ever really talking about it. Dinners were usually together. Even on her longest days, she liked cooking. I did the cleaning. We watched documentaries, argued about politics in a way that never got mean, and tried to take one weekend a month to go somewhere, upstate, the coast, even just a hotel downtown to feel like we were somewhere new. Looking back at those years, everything felt balanced. Built with intention. We worked for what we had. We earned the life we shared. Once we settled into the new house, everything felt like it had finally clicked. We'd put in the time, renting, saving, saying no to things we wanted so we could build something better. Now we had space to breathe. Mornings had a flow. Eliza would start her day before me, setting up the daycare room, laying out crafts and snack bins, getting ready for the chorus of tiny voices that arrived like clockwork at 8 a.m. I worked from the den most days, taking meetings, building project timelines, handling clients across 3 time zones. Even though we were technically in the same house, we didn't hover around each other. We had separate worlds during work hours. But we'd cross paths, she'd bring me coffee mid-morning, I'd help carry strollers out in the afternoon, or fix the wobbly chair someone's kid had kicked one too many times. It wasn't dramatic or romantic. It was simple, functional. It worked. By year 3 in that house, her daycare was full, 6 kids, sometimes more if someone had a sibling in town. She was organized, firm but kind. Parents loved her. Kids adored her. They called her Miss Eliza, and clung to her legs at pickup time. She started getting requests months in advance, had a waiting list by the end of the 2nd year. I was proud of her. She didn't talk much about ambition, but she had it, buried deep under that calm surface. She was always moving forward, step by step. My career was stable, too. After landing a major logistics contract with a national retailer, I got offered a directorial role. More responsibility, a pay bump, and finally, the leverage to cut back on the hours. I turned the guest room into a proper office and started taking Fridays as partial days. It gave us more time we used well. We started talking about having kids. Not in a dramatic way, just lightly, like it was the next reasonable step. We'd done the work. Built the structure. We felt ready. That year, we tried. It didn't happen right away, but we didn't pressure it. We figured it would come when it came. In the meantime, we traveled. Small trips. Charleston. Seattle. A week in Nova Scotia that she loved more than she expected. We hiked, took photos, tried strange foods, came home happy and a little more connected each time. Even with her daycare full and my job more demanding, we had energy for each other. Sunday mornings were ours, slow starts, pancakes or eggs, the newspaper spread out across the table. We'd read headlines aloud, argue about articles, trade sections. Her hair would still be messy from sleep, and I'd forget the laptop waiting in the office. Our friends started joking that we were the boring married couple who had it figured out. Maybe we were. We didn't party. We didn't post curated date night photos. But we liked our life. We liked each other. There was a comfort in it that neither of us had grown up with. It wasn't flashy, but it was honest. Full. Whole. The 4th year in our house was one of the most productive stretches of our life together. We were settled, stable, and constantly refining the systems we'd built, finances, routines, responsibilities. I managed our shared budget like a project tracker, and Eliza handled the physical home like an art form. She had a binder for everything, meal plans, home maintenance schedules, even a running list of books she wanted to read that she updated every Sunday night. I teased her about it, but I secretly admired how she ran things with such precision. We weren't flashy, but we were comfortable. Our weekends took on a rhythm, errands in the morning, walks in the park or trips to the co-op in the afternoon. Sunday dinners were usually just the two of us, but sometimes we invited friends. We kept the circle small, mostly other couples in the area or a few of her former co-workers from the daycare circuit. We didn't entertain a lot, but when we did, it felt intimate, warm. Eliza liked candles and soft music in the background. She always cooked too much and made sure people left with leftovers. Professionally, things kept climbing. I was leading multiple teams by then, managing remote talent, and getting invited to quarterly summits that had once seemed out of reach. I didn't travel often, but when I did, Eliza made the sweetest care packages, little bags of snacks, a handwritten note, once even a pair of socks because I told her hotel rooms were always cold. It was those things that stuck with me. The details she remembered. Around this time, we started seriously talking about adoption. After more than a year of trying with no success, we'd both come to terms with the idea that our family might grow differently than we planned. Eliza brought it up first, carefully, like she wasn't sure how I'd respond. But I loved the idea. It wasn't about biology for me. It was about building something that lasted, something rooted in care, in choice. We attended a few information sessions, met with an agency twice. It was early, but we were committed. We started prepping one of the spare rooms, repainting it, adding shelves, even looking at convertible cribs that could grow with the child. Eliza made mood boards, pinned ideas, and kept folders on her laptop full of inspiration. She was excited. I was, too. Our parents were supportive, if a bit surprised. They'd expected the traditional route, but once we explained our decision, they got behind it. Her mother sent us a stack of old children's books from Eliza's childhood. My father offered to help build a custom bookshelf for the room. We all started imagining what it might look like, our home with a child in it. In all those months, the feeling I remember most wasn't happiness, it was certainty. The kind you don't question because it's stitched into every part of your life. We'd built a life slowly, carefully, and fully. Every decision was made with the other person in mind. That's what it had always been. We moved into our current home almost 5 years after we got married. It was just outside the city, close enough to make commuting manageable but far enough to enjoy quiet evenings without the constant hum of traffic. The house itself wasn't flashy, 3 bedrooms, a modest backyard, a front porch with room for a swing. What made it perfect was how it felt, earned, lived in, and fully ours. At that point, Eliza had shifted from her early childcare job into private consulting for early childhood education programs. She helped preschools refine their curricula, advised on space design, even ran workshops for new educators. It started small, local work, a few schools through word of mouth, but soon she was getting consistent requests from districts across the state. She ran everything from home, working in a sunlit room off the kitchen that she turned into a cozy office with floating bookshelves and sticky notes lining one side of the wall. Meanwhile, I was climbing steadily in my company. I'd been promoted twice in 3 years and was now heading up a division that focused on logistics strategy for mid-sized manufacturing firms. It wasn't the kind of job that made headlines, but I liked the challenge, finding the inefficiencies in something complicated and making it work better. I traveled once or twice a quarter, usually for 2 or 3 days, but most of my time was spent at the home office we built together on the second floor. Our schedules were full, but balanced. We synced calendars at the start of each month, dividing grocery runs, home maintenance, and dinners with friends. Eliza handled most of the cooking. She loved to try new things, especially elaborate weekend meals with herbs from her little garden out back. I took care of the dishes, trash, and all things involving a toolbox. We spent our evenings in a quiet rhythm. Sometimes on the back patio with wine, other nights curled up watching movies or planning out the next room renovation. Eliza had a soft spot for design blogs, and we were slowly turning the house into something that felt like an extension of us. We repainted the hallway a warm slate blue. She picked new curtains every season. I built her a reading nook in the corner of the living room with custom shelves and a small lamp she found at an antique store. Weekends were usually reserved for friends or family, dinner with her sister's family, game night with the couple 2 blocks over, or a full lazy Sunday where we stayed in pajamas until dinner. It wasn't exciting in the way some people described their lives, but it was full, predictable in the best way. It had a rhythm we both seemed to need. There were occasional disagreements, of course, small things like whether we needed new towels again or which car was due for an oil change. But they never lingered. We knew how to communicate by then, how to give each other space and come back when the heat cooled off. That's how we'd always done it. We talked about the future more often now. Travel plans, home upgrades, maybe even growing the family. Nothing rushed. Everything in its own time. It felt like we were exactly where we were supposed to be. It started with small things, little moments that didn't seem significant on their own. At first, I thought maybe Eliza was just tired. She'd been taking on more clients lately, and some of her work had started to involve occasional day trips to schools farther out. She mentioned she might have to start staying overnight once or twice a month if the projects expanded. I supported it. She'd worked hard to get to where she was, and I knew she loved what she did. But her energy shifted. Not dramatically, just differently. She used to greet me at the door when I came down from the home office, always with something small, a comment about a podcast she listened to, a new dinner idea, or some random piece of trivia she'd picked up. That faded. Some days she barely looked up from her laptop. Other times she was already in the bedroom with the door closed, claiming she needed to decompress. She also started guarding her phone more than usual. Again, nothing alarming. We'd never had a culture of checking each other's devices, and I didn't want to start now. But I noticed she kept it face down more often. When a message popped up, she'd turn it over quickly or step away to answer it. She said it was just work, an anxious client or a last-minute adjustment to one of her workshop materials. I believed her. Dinners grew quieter. We still sat across from each other, still made time to eat together, but the conversation didn't flow the way it used to. I'd ask about her day, and she'd answer in short, efficient phrases. No storytelling. No tangents. No laughter. If I pushed for details, she'd say she was just exhausted and didn't feel like talking. At night, she started staying up later. At first, she said she needed more time to wind down, so she'd watch shows on her tablet with headphones or read in the living room. Then she began saying she couldn't sleep and would sometimes leave the bed altogether, crashing on the couch or in the guest room, just to get a few hours without tossing and turning. I didn't think much of it. I've had bouts of insomnia myself, but it started happening more often than not. She also began dressing a little differently. Nothing dramatic, but there was a shift: new clothes, more makeup on days she had client meetings, and perfume I hadn't smelled in years. I mentioned once that she looked especially nice heading out the door one morning, and she barely acknowledged it with a half-smile before rushing off. I chalked it up to her feeling good, maybe trying to stay sharp and confident in her line of work. There was no single moment that screamed something was wrong. No outburst. No accusation. Just a low hum of distance I couldn't quite place. We still functioned well on the surface. The bills were paid, the house was clean, the schedules aligned. But the warmth we'd cultivated, the way we'd lingered over conversations, checked in during the day, found little excuses to connect, that part felt like it had been quietly unplugged. I figured it would pass. Maybe we just needed a getaway, a reset, a break from the routine. These phases happened in long-term marriages. I'd heard it from others. I wasn't worried. Not yet. Summer rolled in with heat waves and long stretches of cloudless days. Usually, that meant evening walks after dinner, sitting on the porch with cold drinks, the two of us quietly watching the neighborhood settle into dusk. But this year, that rhythm slipped. Eliza started working longer hours. At least, that's what she said. She'd leave earlier in the mornings, often before I came downstairs, and came home later, sometimes after dark. If I asked about her day, her answers were clipped and vague. I was swamped, she'd say. Just exhausted. She smiled less. Not in a cold way, just distracted. Like her thoughts were always half a room away. I tried not to read too much into it. We were both busy. I had a major contract coming through work, and my days were just as hectic. I figured we'd reconnect when the pace slowed down again. But the distance became harder to ignore. She canceled a weekend trip we'd planned with friends, saying she had too much to prepare for an upcoming client presentation. When I offered to help, review materials, proofread slides, she brushed it off. "It's nothing you'd be interested in," she said. I let it go. One Friday night, I came home from grabbing takeout and found her in the backyard, talking on the phone. She didn't hear me come in. Her voice was soft, lower than usual. She paced slowly, one hand on her hip. When I stepped onto the porch, she turned quickly and ended the call. Said it was her client, someone from one of the charter schools she'd recently signed with. Something about logistics, needing to be settled before Monday. I nodded. I didn't question it. But I remembered the look in her eyes, flat and unreadable, like she'd been somewhere else completely before I stepped into view. Sleep became irregular. Some nights she didn't come to bed at all. Other nights, she was already asleep before I got there. I tried to create space without pulling away, giving her time, offering support, suggesting we take a short trip together, just the two of us. She always had a reason to delay. Too much on her plate. A deadline. A new client coming in from out of state. She kept her phone on her at all times now. Even in the bathroom. If it buzzed during dinner, she'd glance at it quickly and set it aside without comment. Once or twice, I caught her typing rapidly and then locking the screen as soon as I approached. I wanted to ask. I almost did. But something about the tone of her recent days made confrontation feel like the wrong move. Like any attempt to push would only send her farther away. Instead, I kept things light. I suggested we host her sister for dinner. She agreed but didn't seem particularly interested. I tried joking with her more, referencing old memories, silly things we used to laugh about. Sometimes she played along. Other times, she seemed to forget the context altogether. We were still technically functioning, meals, bills, appointments, but there was a curtain between us now. I couldn't tell if she was trying to protect something or hide behind it. Still, I held on to the belief that it would pass. These things always did, didn't they? The decision to follow Eliza didn't come in a single flash of doubt. It was more like erosion, small grains of trust slowly slipping away, until all that remained was a question I couldn't keep quiet anymore. I wasn't even looking to catch her in something. I told myself it was just about clarity. Maybe she was burned out. Maybe she needed space. Maybe there was something she wasn't saying because she didn't know how. But part of me was done wondering in the dark. The first time I followed her, it was a Wednesday. She told me she had a late meeting across town and wouldn't be back until after 9. She left around 5:30 in a fitted blouse and black pants, minimal makeup but perfume I hadn't seen her wear in over a year. I waited 10 minutes, then grabbed my keys and followed from a distance. She didn't go to any school or client's office. She drove straight to a hotel near the business district. Not even a high-end one, just one of those clean, quiet places with back entrances and no questions asked. She pulled into the lot and parked in the back. I parked 2 rows away, angled so I could see but not be seen. She sat in the car for a minute, checked her phone, then got out. She wasn't alone for long. A man met her by the rear entrance. I didn't recognize him, broad shoulders, neatly trimmed beard, mid-30s maybe. He kissed her as soon as he reached her. Not on the cheek. Not like colleagues. This was slow, familiar, practiced. Then they walked in together. I didn't move. I didn't feel much of anything. I just sat there with my hands locked around the steering wheel, staring at the door long after it had closed behind them. I didn't confront her that night. When she came home close to 10, she looked tired. Said the meeting went long. Ate a slice of leftover pizza and disappeared into the shower. I acted like everything was normal. 2 days later, I followed her again. Different man. Different hotel. Same behavior. That second one shook something loose. I started tracking her patterns more deliberately, what she said, where she claimed she was going, and how it matched with where she actually ended up. Over the next few weeks, I watched her meet 4 different men. Never the same place twice. Never the same guy twice, either. She was careful, almost professional. No texts I could trace, no suspicious receipts, nothing left behind at home. If I hadn't seen it with my own eyes, I wouldn't have believed it. She wasn't just having an affair. She was running something parallel. Detached. Efficient. Like this other life required as much scheduling and polish as the one we shared. I still didn't say anything. I smiled when I needed to. Made dinner. Asked about her day. Touched her shoulder when I passed her in the kitchen. I didn't miss a single beat. Because I needed time. Time to think. Time to process. Time to plan. Then, one morning, Eliza sat across from me with the softest smile I'd seen from her in months. "I'm pregnant," she said. I looked her in the eyes. Reached across the table. Took her hand. "That's incredible." And in that moment, I knew exactly what I had to do next. After Eliza told me she was pregnant, I wrapped my arms around her and held her tightly, letting her head rest against my shoulder while she breathed out a shaky laugh. She wiped away a tear, one of those quiet ones she probably didn't expect. I told her how proud I was. How excited. I touched her stomach, kissed her forehead. She looked at me like I was everything she needed in that moment. And maybe I was, just not in the way she thought. I already knew. I knew the child wasn't mine. It couldn't be. For months, our physical relationship had been non-existent. Even when we did try, it was distant, like she was just going through motions. But I said nothing. I didn't flinch. I congratulated her, offered to start clearing the second bedroom. I told her we'd go to the first appointment together, make a plan, start fresh. She smiled through all of it, almost relieved. As if pretending this child was ours made her feel less dirty. In reality, I had already begun taking notes. It was around the time I followed her to meet the fifth man. He was younger, probably mid-20s, sharp haircut, cocky walk. She met him in a different part of town, a quieter motel off the highway, where guests paid in cash and no one used real names. I sat in my car across the lot, watching him slide his hand down her back as they walked in. The sixth man came 2 days later. A teacher, I think. I followed her from a public library to a parking garage, where they stood between two cars and kissed like it was the first time. It wasn't. Not from the way their bodies moved. I took photos from a distance. Then videos. I started saving everything, license plates, timestamps, locations. I created folders on a hard drive, each labeled with a date and name I assigned them. Man 1. Man 2. Man 3. And so on. I wasn't rushing. I wanted every angle covered. I learned who they were. I found their spouses. All of them married. Every single one. Most of them with children. I compiled their names and backgrounds, found their wives on social media, LinkedIn, school directories. I wasn't going to blow up my life in a fit of rage. That would be easy, for her. She could twist that. Frame it as weakness. I wanted her to feel the truth. Not just guilt. Not just shame. Consequences. I met with a private investigator. Not because I needed him to uncover the affairs, I already had proof, but because I wanted someone professional to verify and archive the timeline. So nothing could be disputed. No excuses. No blurring the details. I gave him everything I had. He delivered even more. Bank transfers. Secret purchases. Hotel records. Messages between her and the men, retrieved from a cloud I didn't even know she used. Eliza, meanwhile, blossomed in her role as expectant mother. She let me rub her back in the evenings, accepted all the prenatal vitamins I ordered for her, let me hold her hand at the first ultrasound. She giggled when we heard the heartbeat. She thought I believed every bit of it. She had no idea the storm was already forming around her. It began quietly. I reached out to the wives first, the ones I had confirmed through my research and the private investigator. 6 women. 6 strangers. 6 lives that, like mine, were living beneath a lie. I wrote each of them a separate message, crafted with care. I wasn't accusatory or emotional. I included screenshots, time-stamped photos, dates, places. I told them I wasn't looking for chaos, I was offering the truth, something they deserved as much as I did. The first response came within an hour. She wrote only 3 words, I knew it. Others followed, some with disbelief, some with tears in their words. One asked to call me. Another sent back photos she'd taken of her husband that eerily matched my timeline. We weren't alone, and that made something in me settle. It wasn't just betrayal, it was a network of destruction, and now we were going to dismantle it together. One of the wives was a paralegal. She connected me with a firm specializing in domestic fraud and personal injury tied to emotional and financial abuse. I booked a consultation. Brought every piece of evidence, every folder, every recorded conversation. The attorney was stunned. Not just at the scope, but the precision. "You've got a case stronger than anything I've seen in years," she said. We filed the suit 2 weeks later. A joint action. Charges of fraud for personal gain. Emotional and financial damages. Deceit that led to marital breakdowns. My wife and each of her lovers were named directly. Each wife joined the filing, submitting their own evidence and claims. What started as my personal disaster had become a legal firestorm. In the meantime, I kept up the act. At home, I painted the nursery with Eliza. We argued about curtains. Picked baby names. I pretended to care deeply about every moment. I kissed her on the forehead every night. I kept a spreadsheet of court filing deadlines in my office drawer while I massaged her feet during Netflix shows. Then the summons arrived. Delivered by courier, one for her, one for each man. She opened it at the kitchen table. I watched her eyes move across the page, the color draining from her face, her fingers trembling against the crisp paper. Her lips moved as she read the names. Then her own. Then mine. When she looked up, I didn't flinch. "I know everything," I said. Calm. Cold. Every man. Every lie. Every time you looked me in the eye and said nothing. She tried to speak. I raised a hand and cut her off. "Save it. You're done here." I stood, walked to the front door, and opened it wide. "Out." She hesitated, then said my name, soft, pleading. That's when I showed her the hard drive. Held it up like a relic. "Every second is on here. Every hotel. Every kiss. Every night you said you were working late." She broke. Tried to cry. I didn't move. "Take your things," I said, "and leave. You'll hear from the court soon. And don't expect to come back." She left that night with a single bag and no shoes. The nursery door stayed shut behind her. The media picked it up first. A small local outlet published an article after the court filings went public, naming each of the defendants in the case, my wife and the 6 men she'd slept with. The headline was tame, but the content wasn't. It outlined the scope of the joint lawsuit, referenced fraud, moral damage, and included quotes from 2 of the other spouses involved. By the next morning, the story had spread. Their jobs began falling apart immediately. One of the men, an accountant at a mid-sized firm, was let go that same afternoon. Another was a school teacher. The school board suspended him pending investigation, then quietly removed his name from the staff list 2 days later. The others weren't so lucky. Their employers acted fast. HR departments sent polite but definitive emails, the kind that begin with, "in light of recent developments," and end with the end of a career. As for Eliza, her consulting contracts evaporated almost overnight. Every school and organization she had worked with distanced themselves publicly. Clients backed out. Her website went down. Her name became radioactive. And then came the court date. We were all there. All 6 of the wives and husbands, united by betrayal, by truth, by rage sharpened into strategy. Eliza stood across from me in that courtroom, her shoulders tight, her mouth drawn into a pale, defiant line. She barely looked at me. The judge was clinical and thorough. Our attorney laid out the case with meticulous detail, emails, surveillance, witness testimony, even hotel check-ins cross-referenced with false invoices Eliza had sent to clients for reimbursement. Her lover's complicity was spelled out clearly. They knew she was married. They'd used her to hide their own affairs. And together, they'd built a web of deceit that cost all of us peace, security, and in some cases, even income. Then came the sentencing. All 7, my wife and her 6 partners, were found guilty of fraud and personal misconduct for gain. The court issued sentences of correctional labor and a joint financial penalty. Each was ordered to pay moral compensation to the spouses they had betrayed, enough to sting, and then some. But that wasn't the end. At the urging of the judge, a paternity test was performed. Eliza had resisted at first. But legally, she couldn't avoid it. The results were definitive: the child was not mine. It belonged to the second man I had followed, the one with the expensive watch and real estate job. The moment the result was read aloud, Eliza's face collapsed. She sobbed into her hands. But no one moved to comfort her. The court granted me full custody at birth, citing deception, emotional abuse, and Eliza's unstable living situation. The biological father was ordered to pay support, an amount that, when combined with Eliza's share of the penalties, would dig deep into whatever savings either of them had left. By the end of the week, every person involved had lost their jobs, their families, and their reputations. It wasn't just legal. It was public. The story made national coverage on a slow news cycle. Forums exploded. People speculated. Screenshots were shared. Eliza tried to call me after the trial. Once. I didn't answer. She texted later, "I didn't think you had this in you." She was right. Because she never really knew me. The silence that followed was different from the one that came before. Before, it had been heavy, uncertain, filled with questions I didn't want to ask. But after the trial, after the truth had finally ruptured through every lie, the silence felt earned. Like a field after a storm, wrecked but clear. I didn't hear from Eliza again. Not directly. Her parents reached out once, apologetic, embarrassed. They said they hadn't raised her to lie like that, to treat family like something disposable. I told them I didn't blame them. I didn't. They were kind to me through all of it. And when the custody ruling came down, they didn't fight it. Her mother even wrote a letter to the judge, quietly backing my petition. Eliza moved out of the city. Word was, she tried to restart her business under a new name, but it didn't last long. Her name was too well known now. People remembered. Google remembered. Parents weren't willing to hand over their children to someone with that kind of record. I don't know where she ended up. I didn't ask. It didn't matter. As for the others, the men, most of them settled quietly. Divorces. Property splits. Reputation damage that lingered like rot. One of them tried to threaten legal action against me for emotional manipulation, but my attorney laughed it out of the room. I had documentation, evidence, and the court already on my side. Nothing stuck. Their ex-wives and I remained loosely in touch for a while, bonded by mutual wreckage. Eventually, we all moved on. The child was born in late spring. A boy. I was at the hospital. I held him first. She wasn't allowed to keep him. That had been part of the ruling: no custody, no visitation until a formal reevaluation after 2 years, and even then, only under strict conditions. She'd fought that part, begged in mediation, but the judge had seen the videos, the timelines, the web of lies she'd maintained while carrying him. It wasn't just infidelity, it was calculated, reckless endangerment of a family. He had dark hair and a surprisingly calm expression for a newborn. He didn't cry much. I remember thinking that was strange. The nurses called him a thinker. I named him Colin. It's strange raising a child you know isn't biologically yours, but love doesn't always arrive by bloodline. Sometimes it arrives in tiny, urgent breaths, in the way his fingers curl around mine, or how his face softens when he hears my voice. He knows me as his father. And I am. I've rebuilt in the time since. Quietly. I kept the house. Renovated the nursery into a little explorer's room, filled with books and wooden toys. My work offered a sabbatical, which I took, spent the months just being home, learning how to be a father in every sense. I've started to laugh again. Not the polite, guarded kind. Real laughter. Messy, unplanned. People ask if I regret how far I took it. If the revenge was too much. I don't. Because it wasn't just revenge, it was justice. It was reclaiming truth in a life that had been quietly poisoned. I didn't just expose what she did. I made sure no one would ever forget it. And now, when I sit in the rocking chair in the corner of Colin's room, holding him as the evening light fades across the floor, there's only one thing I think about. I didn't lose everything. She did.